This is going to be a little bit different kind of couch talk today. It's just going to be me. I want to talk to you guys about Chop Fest. It happened this past weekend. If you kept up with the Braves or were in around Atlanta, you might have heard about it. It was the first one to be held at SunTrust Park, and definitely won't be the last. Some of the things I talked about first, I want to talk about Tim Hudson and Joe Simpson getting inducted into the Braves Hall of Fame. I think that's a great honor for both of them. Huddy was a great player. I go by Hudson. His last name's Hudson. So from an early age, even when I didn't keep up with the Braves, I liked him. Heard some of his stats this week from a podcast I was listening to, and he was really a great player for the Braves for quite a while. And even though it's unfortunate that it didn't happen with the Braves, I'm glad that he was able to go and win a World Series before he called it quits to his career in the majors. Joe Simpson, there's not a lot of stats to talk about with him because he was an announcer, but I think he's done a great job. I don't know that I've listened to him a lot, but I know that this is a great honor for him. I believe he's only the second player that will ever have been inducted into the Braves Hall of Fame that didn't actually wear a uniform on the field, so that's very good for him. Great for both those guys. Next, I want to talk about Anthopoulos, the new GM. He's come in a kind of bad situation with some of the things that were happening from the old regime, but also a good situation in that even with the penalties and losing some of our guys, he still has a great farm system, a lot of top prospects, and the number 2 overall prospect according to MLB and the number 1 according to Baseball America, I believe it was, in Ronald Acuna. So there's a lot of good things there, a lot to work with. I liked what he talked about this past week about not chasing costs but value. He spoke about a guy that was there that he signed because it became a very cheap deal, even though he wasn't previously interested while he was with Toronto and ended up really regretting it. And so I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that he's looking to make really good decisions, not just ones that, oh, well, this makes sense, this is easy. So the other thing is, when we first signed him, I was worried about some of our prospects. He made a lot of great moves for Toronto, but in making some of those great moves, he gave up a lot of young talent that had the potential to make a good impact at the major league level at some point. But now we got guys like Donaldson, great player, won an MVP up there in Toronto. So it's hard to argue with that, but I was worried about him selling out maybe some of our young guys to bring in talent. And after suffering through the Braves the past couple seasons and how they haven't been that good, I don't want to see those guys go for an older guy that's maybe only going to be really good for a couple of seasons. So far, he's not upset me or disappointed me at all. He's really decided and come out and said that he doesn't want to trade a guy or make any big-time trades until he knows really what he's got. He can look and read about scouting reports on guys, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, all of that. But that still doesn't give the full picture until you see them play and really honestly kind of see them play in person. And it sounds like that's what he wants to take the time and do before he makes any big time moves. Might we have missed out on a guy like Yelich because of that? Possibly. From what I've heard, they weren't wanting to talk a deal without Acuna, and I don't want to trade Acuna for him, even though I really like Yelich. I think he's a great player. I don't want to make that kind of deal, especially with how close Acuna is. So I like that. We'll see if that stays or if he goes back and does some of the things he did in Toronto, which again, I say, were not necessarily bad moves, but I don't want to give up a lot of talent just to get some older, more proven guys when these guys can be really great in their own right. Now, I'm sure we'll make some moves, and I might like them, I might not, but if they make the team better, then I'm okay with it. So, there's all that. Next, I want to talk about Freddie. If you watched last year, you know that Freddie got off to an amazing start last year. He really did great at the end of the 2016 season, and it carried right on to the beginning of the 2017. Was looking like, even on a bad team, he would be in the MVP talk through the first month and a half or so. And then, in a game against Toronto, he broke his wrist, ended up missing a lot of time, hurt me. He was on my fantasy team, was rocking and rolling, and so I had to figure out how to replace him. But even more so, and more importantly, the Braves had to figure out how to replace him. And he came back right before the All-Star break, played a very good second half, played a really great game or season, but you could notice that he wasn't really driving the ball like he did at the beginning. And I believe he said, even himself, that while he came back and was healthy and was able to play well, he didn't have the real power in his wrist to really drive the ball and make some of the hits that he did in the very end. So I'm happy to report that he said that his wrist is feeling fine. He got into some of his off-season routines a little bit early to make sure that he got the strength up and was ready to go, and everything sounds good so far. So that's awesome. And now Freddie's my favorite player. So this next part really excites me about what he said. He wants to be a Brave for life. And that's really not common in today's sports, and especially baseball. With trading and everything else, you don't see a guy play for one team for their entire career very often at all. I would love that. Like I said, he's my favorite player. And so I hope to see that happen with the way he's playing. I think he'd be a great addition to keep for a long, long time. And we'll just see what happens. Lastly, I want to talk about one of the other big things they unveiled at Chop Fest. Earlier last week before Chop Fest, they talked about a new mascot. Pat Homer for the past few seasons. He's been good, but at least from what I've seen, he hasn't had a whole lot of personality. So I was okay with us looking to replace him, get someone new, get someone that brings a little more excitement. I was looking forward to. I wanted to see what they were doing. It was going to be kind of interesting. Never seen a new mascot unveiled for anybody. So I didn't go to Chop Fest, but I saw a video online. Skipped through to the end to just see what it was. And when this thing came out, I was very disappointed. My first thought is that it looks like a beige Fanatic. Looks a lot like a Fanatic, just different color. And from people I've talked to, that's the same kind of feeling that I've seen them have. And I was hoping for something of our own, something for us to have, not just necessarily go off of another model that's worked so exactly, or looks like exactly. I don't know where their thoughts come, where it originated from. So I was very disappointed in that. And I was even more disappointed because I'd kind of had these hopes, far-fetched as they may have been, that they would play into where the Braves organization is. We're at a point where we've been rebuilding, but these guys are starting to hit AAA and hit the majors. Ozzie came up last year. Gohara came up. We had quite a few pitchers come up and work a few innings starting and out of the pen. Dansby came up the year before, and then this past year wasn't so great, but it could still turn around. Acuna has jumped all the way to AAA last year. Might make it to the majors to start the season, but should definitely be up there by some point in this year. And so to play on that, I think they could have done something, and they talk about how that all is going on, and that there's another guy that not everyone might know about, but he's been doing a lot of great things in Gwinnett for the past few years. And so they're going to promote him to the majors and promote a mascot that's never been done before. Promote Chopper. If you haven't been there to a Gwinnett game, Chopper, I believe he's a chipmunk type thing, big 2 front teeth, funny, really good mascot. Like the Fanatic in his funniness and all that, like any good mascot should be, but his own thing. Kind of looks different, has his own style, from what I've seen. And so I think that could have been different. It would have been a story. It would have been something of us. I've never heard of, and I don't think it's ever happened, of a mascot being promoted from a minor league to the next level, especially to the majors. So it would have been an interesting tidbit story. Definitely not going to change necessarily how the Braves play this year or anything like that, but just a cool little thing. I think they missed a great opportunity. Could they still do it? Possibly. I don't really see it necessarily happen, but it would have been fun. And I think the kids will still probably love Blooper, but they would have loved Chopper too, and I think it would have just been a better story. It would have been something interesting, something different. That's how I feel about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you like what I said. If you want to come and leave some feedback, leave some comments on this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, come to our website, drop some information. You can get to us through Facebook, Twitter, any of our social medias. And if you haven't followed or liked those pages, please do that. Give us your thoughts on the video, on anything that you saw or heard about from Chop Fest, about Acuna, whether you think he should start the season down in the minors or be on the opening day roster, or anything else. Should we sign a guy? What should we do? What do you think? And it might end up in another video at some point. So again, thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a good night. God bless.